Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. I'm Ace Edwards, right alongside
Connor Baltazar.
And it was another Wildcat victory for the Kansas State University football team in what we will call and called a little bit of friendly competition between Texas Tech and K-State, even though one guy on Twitter was not very friendly about it. He did not like Style Boys. He did not like Style.
No, he did.
But anyway, aside from that, it was a pretty good game. It was goofy. Things got a little wild, a little bit too close for my liking, especially towards the end, which, well, actually, no. It was just a bit too close for my liking the entire time, which is something I think I said on the preview show. Was I expected this to be uncomfortable, but I expected us to win. And I think you agreed with me.
Yeah, I did agree with that, as I recall. But yeah, I think that kind of rings true for this game.
Yeah. Despite things getting a little bit too uncomfortable, a little bit too close, and Donovan Smith admittedly doing a little bit of stat padding, which, yeah, that's fine. He can do that. It happens to anybody.
Yeah.
We prevailed, and we have moved up to number 20 in the country. Your Kansas State Wildcats are ranked number 20 in the nation. So congratulations to that. But let's move on into the general takeaways for the game. And the first one that I feel like a lot of people are going to focus on, and it's going to be a topic for us. It's going to be the first thing we talk about, and it's probably going to be expanded upon quite a bit. And that is, despite the fact that we played a pretty reasonably complete game on quarters 1, 3, and 4, it was the second quarter that was pretty worrisome. And before I go on a inevitably long diatribe about why it was worrisome, Connor, do you have any thoughts to get out about it?
I will say I'll add a bit of the first quarter into that, because over and over it seemed like you and I were saying we should really be up like 21-0 right now, or we should be up 28-0, and we just kept shooting ourselves in the foot, weren't finishing. We were kind of sleepwalking early. It felt like after the first drive, because I think we just got comfortable and we're like, oh, this game's in hand. So I don't want to step on any of your points, but I feel like you're going to have some pretty similar sentiments to this as I have. But it was a very frustrating game, especially early on.
Yeah, the thing is that, and credit to this Texas Tech team, because I really do think that they're going to be a good team. Like, they're going to finish top half of the Big 12, and that's a credit to Joey McGuire and the culture he's built there. But we made the mistake that I feel like a lot of schools are going to make, and it's a mistake that every school that Texas Tech has faced this year has made. Except for NC State, they've let Texas Tech stay in it. And Texas Tech is going to be an annoying school to play just because of their capacity to stay in the game. Like, you're never going to, at least this year, you're never going to have a game against Texas Tech, which is, it's going to be easy. Oh, we're up 3 scores like in the second quarter. They're going to roll over and die. No, no, they are not. But a lot of the struggles in the second quarter really did come down to schematics. And I was telling Connor about this during the second quarter. And this is specifically when it comes to defense. Offense is a bit harder to evaluate because I don't have all 22. Someone somewhere has all 22, please.
Hint, hint, hint.
Still would do disgusting things for all 22. But at least in the second quarter, towards the back end, that last drive that the defense had, the main reason why, and this kind of gets ganked into another point, the reason why we had a little bit of trouble on that last drive was because Texas Tech took advantage of the fact that our number one priority on defense is to play fast. They did to us what I thought we were going to do a lot to Texas Tech, which is implement a lot of the running game. where to a degree, the intent is to let you win a little bit, to slow play things. So that way gaps start opening up a little bit more in the running game. That way you get people going in the wrong direction. And that's a lot of why that drive really worked for them, because we got caught looking at motions and then the ball going the opposite way because they slow play the handoff immediately after the motion. Misdirection is something that's going to give this team headaches on defense just because of how fast we want to play. Now, granted, credit to Joe Klanderman, he figured it out. Like, he told the defense, hey, they're slow playing it, just stop, like, take a breath if you think it's going to be the run and just maintain your gap. You don't need to go for a big 5-yard TFL. You need to stay in your gap and make sure it's no gain. And that was a big part of the second quarter on defense. On offense, I think a lot of it had to do with complacency and also red zone play calling being interesting, to say the
Yeah.
least. And because we forced a few turnovers and, we just didn't capitalize on them, which is very frustrating. But hey, if that's my main concern, is one quarter out of 4 and we won the game, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I feel bad complaining a lot, but
Yeah.
because I mean, yeah, we did win. We did win. Fairly comfortably, I'd say. Got a little bit suspect at the end for a
Yeah.
while, which the end is a whole separate ordeal to get into.
Yeah,
But
I forgot to put that down on the general game day recap, but we'll talk about that at the end.
yeah,
The next thing that we mentioned is that their offensive line really, really was not having a great time, which is part of why that counter game worked so well, was because the offensive line wasn't having a grand old time. Felix was ridiculous this day. I feel every single time Felix takes the field, he's moving his draft stock up, which is, that sounds easy to do, just play your game. It's not easy. It's not
he
easy.
he's starting to win a lot of reps that last year he would have fought hard, but not quite won. I think almost all, if not all of his sacks against Texas Tech were double teams. Either that or where he was having to come all the way around and really make a concerted effort. It wasn't just like a pocket sack. He'd have to get like all the way across the pocket, go all the way around a guy. He had at least one sack that I could think of to memory where he had to fight through a double team and he had to split a double team to get there. That's the sort of thing that NFL teams are going to want to see, is you dominating Power 5 level competition, but you're still clearly better than it. And he was making the left side of Texas Tech's offensive line look bad, like just downright not Power 5 quality yesterday. And there's an argument to be made for that, honestly, but there's
For the
still,
sake of my narrative, it is because
yeah,
Felix is good.
yeah. But I will say they're still at a Power 5 school with Power 5 coaching and Power 5 facilities. So it's not like they're completely useless or anything like that.
Yeah.
And their current left tackle can't be worse than the one last year. So
Poor man.
he will continue to catch strays until the end of time on the show. But which it could happen to anybody.
Yeah, I mean, at least we
Yeah,
don't remember his. I could pull up his name, but I'm not going to.
it's
But
that's unnecessary.
that's not a stray. That's a target. But
Yeah.
yeah, and even outside of Felix, Matlick, even though he was a little bit hobbled, got a few pressures. Eli Huggins, when he wasn't hurt, was making his presence felt. D Hens was making his presence felt, and the man himself, Uso, towards the back end of the game, and of course, one we can't forget, it's the one who actually tied Felix for sacks. It's Khalid Duke.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. He was great.
their offensive line could not handle it. They couldn't.
Yeah. And the pass protection, they were completely and utterly overmatched. And I don't think anybody was really surprised by that, honestly. That was kind of like the one prediction I feel like I would have locked in the mortgage on that house as if I have a mortgage.
Yeah.
And because I think we both felt extremely confident that K-State was going to win the trenches, if nothing else, in the passing game.
Yeah. Last thing before we talk about the last parts of the game is the kicking is now becoming dependable. You know, quietly after Chris Tennant was being criticized, it's and the only reason we mention this is because, you know, credit where credit's due. He's finally figured it out, and we're that's great for him, and I really like that.
Yeah, yeah. Good for him. One of the field goals was a little bit flat, but that's kind of getting nitpicky. If
Liner.
yeah, if they're going in, they're going in. And I'm happy with that. One criticism I guess that could be levied is that he's not attempting many deep field goals, but honestly, I'd say that's just a credit to the offense, like
Yeah.
getting down the field. Like that's not a Chris Tennant can't control where he's attempting a field goal from.
Yeah, like
So
unless he's warming up.
that is true. Yeah. But yeah, I've been pleased with how he's done. He has not missed a field goal or extra point since Mizzou, I believe. Knock on wood. Um, so I'm pretty happy with how he's done as of late. But yeah,
Yeah. And now we can talk about the last couple sequences of the game. And let's kind of start with the beginning. Well, not necessarily the beginning. Let's just talk about that last little sequence. So onside kick time after Texas Tech converts a 2-point conversion for some reason. It was still a two-score game, but they convert a 2-point for some reason. And then they go for the onside kick. Cade Warner hops for it, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the ball would have gone out of bounds if he didn't touch it. Because if he, and granted, that's a situation where I don't expect him to like stop time and then just think about it a little bit more. He's operating on instinct. But if that ball goes out of bounds, it's our ball. But he hops up to try and make the catch. It bounces off his hands and goes right to Texas Tech. Okay, that's fine. We just need to get a stop on defense. And to our credit, after like the second play, I think it was, the refs blow the whistle early and Julius Brent ends up with a pick. I I still don't know what happened. I'm not sure if I was a Texas Tech fan, if I'd be upset because to me that kind of seems inconsequential because at the time there was like 40 seconds left on the clock and you'd have to recover another onside kick even if you scored. But I I've seen a lot of people say that there was blatant point shaving, which is kind of funny.
that is interesting.
Yeah, it's
That's an interesting perspective to take, I guess. Don't know
it,
if I'd agree.
it was just a weird last sequence.
Yeah, that it was a really strange way for it to end. The timing of the whistle was weird because there definitely was a whistle.
Hmm.
Like you could hear it from the stands, but it was after the ball was snapped by at least a second, I'd say.
Hmm.
So it was kind of in that weird gray area where they weren't really sure whether to stop or not, but nobody stopped playing.
Hmm.
Everybody continued to play the play as if it were a regulation play, which I think played into that a little bit. I said play like way too much. But they yeah, that was a weird situation. I wonder if we'll get an explanation on it. One of my thoughts was that it might have been an inadvertent whistle.
Yeah.
One of them might be like Texas Tech like trying to get a timeout, but they were too late.
They were out of
Uh
timeouts.
then it wasn't that. So other than that, I'm not really
No,
sure what
wait.
it was.
No, they weren't. They had a timeout. My bad.
Yeah, they did. They did. They had two. No, they had all
Yeah.
three because they called all of them on the next possession for K-State.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure what the whistle was. I'd be surprised if we ever hear why it is. If I were a Texas Tech fan, I would be annoyed.
I
I
don't think
will
I'd be
say from
pissed. I don't think
yeah,
I'd be angry.
like I think that the opinion here is that you'd like there to like you'd like the refs to figure it out. Obviously you're upset if you're a Tech fan, I think, because I don't think you expect to. I don't think anybody has the thought that they lost because of the whistle
No.
situation. But I do know if it was K-State, I would have wanted the opportunity, at least after getting the touchdown, getting the onside kick. and then getting a big pass play right after that. I would have at least liked a shot at it, but I don't think this was a game breaking choice with it being a two possession game, anyways. So the likelihood of getting two onside kicks back to back is slim. They also did not throw a very good pass at all on that play. Julius Brents had a uh, it wasn't super easy, but it was not a good read. It was probably not going to be complete either way. Um, so I'm not going to lose sleep over it as a K State fan. It as if I were a Texas Tech fan, honestly, I don't think you should lose sleep over it either. It'd be something I'd be annoyed about for the rest of the day, though. Like, God, why'd they do that? But this isn't like something to like remember 2 years down the road.
No, no,
So
don't be an Iowa State
yeah,
fan about
de-
it.
definitely strange, but I think that's where it stops.
Yeah. Now we can move into the stats, and you can have offense this week.
Fair enough. Yeah, offensively, we'll get started with Adrian Martinez and the passing game. Stats took a step back from last week in the passing game. 12 of 19 for 116 yards and a touchdown. He did take 3 sacks. The pass protection, which we'll get into later, was not as good as it needs to be. Granted, the offensive line is dealing with a lot of injury issues, but still, pass protection was definitely subpar. Um, Running game, though, obviously another phenomenal day for the ground game. Adrian Martinez, he had 12 rushes for 171 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then a long of 69, averaging 4.3 yards per carry. A very nice
Nice.
day for Adrian Martinez. If you take out the sack yardage, I think he gets really close to 200 rushing yards on the day,
Yeah.
which I think would have been the first 200-yard rushing day for a K-State QB since Daniel Sams in like 2013. He had like 206 and a loss to Baylor back then. I don't know why I remember that,
But
but
you do.
I do. It's useless, but I do know it. And then Deuce Vaughn, he had a great day as well with a few big carries. After kind of a slowish start to the game, he had 23 rushes for 170 yards and a long of 69. Another nice day for him too. Had 7.4 yards per carry, and Phillip Brooks had a carry for 6 yards, which I do not remember that at all.
It was they counted a bubble screen as backwards pass.
Ah, okay. Well, so he didn't really have a rush, but
Not
it's
really.
technically a rush. But I'm not going to count that. That's stupid.
Yeah.
But yeah, all around, a great day, a really nice day for the run game. No DJ Giddens carries, wasn't necessary. Adrian having a phenomenal day on the ground, starting off hot and then finishing hot, kind of like the team. And then Deuce had some really nice carries in there as well. Receiving wise, Cade Warner led the way, 3 catches for 47 yards. Phillip Brooks, though, did have the big play with 5 catches, 36 yards, and the touchdown where
That was such a terrifying touchdown.
I really thought that it was going to get picked off when it hit off his hands. I was convinced that that was going to be an interception right there and be Adrian's first turnover. But luckily it was not. Philip catches it, makes a guy miss, and then dives, and like it's NCAA 14.
Yeah.
Malik had 1 catch for 13. Deuce had a catch for 11. Ben Sinnott had a catch for 6 yards and a couple of drops. Granted, they were not easy catches
No.
that they would have been. And Wheeler had a catch for 3 yards. And I forgot to mention Deuce did have a fumble that he lost, but he did get kind of injured
He got the
on that
wind
play, got
knocked
the
out of
wind
him.
knocked out of him. So I'm not going to hold it against him, especially because we won. And he also very rarely fumbles. So I'm not going to lose sleep over that. But that wraps up the offensive stats. Not a lot of contributors, really. It was really the Deuce and Adrian show again. What do you have to add about the offense, Ace?
I
At
mean,
least statistically.
statistically, not a whole lot, because that kind of gets into a lot of what I have to say for game day grades. I will say that there's no real better place to no, there is. Never mind. I was about to say there's no better place to talk about KT, but there is definitely a better place to talk about KT because you know, we have a segment that talks about the offensive line. But yeah, I don't have anything else to add there. And now we can talk about the defensive statistics. Let's go in order of the most tackles to least. Starting off with Kobe Savage, who had 9 tackles, 1 TFL, 1 forced fumble, and 1 potential date upcoming in the future. he that might be the best moment of the year, but
so far, yeah.
but Kobe Savage had a good day, and then Khalid Duke had an absolute monster day. 8 tackles, 3 TFLs, all 3 of them were sacks. Monster. I mean it. Like, this is what we thought Khalid Duke was going to produce like last year before he got hurt, especially alongside Felix. And now seeing them, Khalid Duke now up to full speed, and seeing him alongside Felix, it's gross. It's disgusting. That shouldn't be allowed, and yet it is.
Yeah.
But
What I do have one thing that I want to add about Khalid Duke. And it's that he in this one game now has the most sacks that he's ever had in a season, with 3. Because he's never had more than 2 in a year. Partly due to injuries and also just from being like a younger player.
yeah, huh. That's interesting.
Yeah, the more you know.
More you know, indeed. But yeah. Then after that is Josh Hayes, who had 7 tackles, 1 TFL. Austin Moore, quietly again being the best linebacker on the team. That's not a joke. 7 tackles, 1 TFL, 1 interception, 1 PBU, and 1 QB hurry. King Felix Anudike Uzama had 6 tackles, 3 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. I wonder if K-State counts the forced fumble as a sack. Stupid rule from the NCAA. That's so stupid. I'm not over it. But next up is Drake Cheatham, who had 5 tackles on the day, and also kind of he kind of got back shouldered by a tight end who's 6'8". That happens. Like that.
Not much to do about that, really.
Yeah. Daniel Green had 5 tackles and then a pass breakup where he almost did the exact same thing as he did against MU, just jump up and got a pick.
Oh yeah, that would have been awesome.
That's awesome. Julius Brents, 4 tackles, 1 TFL, and 1 pick. TJ Smith, 2 tackles. Gavin Forshea got in. He got 2 tackles. Desmond Purnell, 2 tackles. Brendan Mott, 2 tackles, a QB hurry. Nick Allen, 2 tackles, and a QB hurry. Eli Huggins, 2 tackles. Ty Zentner gets credited with a tackle. Shout out Legatron. And then Jacob Parrish, Matthew Mashmeyer, and Jalen Pickle all get credited with a tackle. Echo Boydo has a tackle and a pass breakup. And then Nate Matlick did not register any stats except for a fumble recovery and a QB hurry, which kind of belies how good he was this game. But yeah, that's the defensive statistics. And there are a couple of people here who well, never mind. That's where game day grades comes in. Do you have any thoughts on stats?
Yeah, just incredible day for Felix and Khalid. Austin Moore also had an incredible day.
Which
I mean,
he just does now, I guess.
I mean, you have here legitimately 4 probably candidates that you could say defensive MVP, and I'd say, yeah, I agree with that. That's all I have for the defensive stats. I mean, you summed it up pretty well.
Yeah. So now we can go into game day grades where we rank every single position group, including the coordinators, on a scale of A+ to F-. If you get an A+, you almost single-handedly won us the game. And if you get an F-, you almost single-handedly lost us the game. But let's start off with the man under center, or most of the time in K-State's case in pistol, and that is Adrian Martinez. Now, this is probably one of the biggest discrepancies that you and I are. Well, no, it's not. That's a lie. I ended up giving Adrian Martinez a B+. And the main reason why I ended up giving him a B+ was there were a few times in the passing game where I want to see him throw with a bit more anticipation. which granted, that's an NFL skill set. That's something NFL quarterbacks are supposed to do, not necessarily as much with college quarterbacks. You don't expect an average college quarterback to be able to throw with a lot of anticipation. That being said, I hold Adrian to a high enough standard to where if Ben Sinnott is working his way up the seam, for example, I expect Adrian Martinez to know, okay, I need to get this ball out right now. I can hit a whole shot between the safeties up the seam and the linebackers. Because there was one or two times where that was a possibility. And that's just something I haven't seen from him much this year, except for in the Oklahoma game where he was exceptional at it. But in the passing game, he was just lackluster. But, well, he wasn't lackluster. He was fine. He was all right. But it's really the rushing that ascends him to a B plus as opposed to, like a C or a C plus. On the ground, Adrian Martinez is the best running quarterback in the country, and I will not be taking questions. I know Malik Cunningham. I know. I know. Okay, you know what? Maybe it's a tie one. It's tied for first between Malik Cunningham and Adrian Martinez. But nevertheless, I ended up giving him a B plus because it was a great day on the ground, all right through the air.
I gave him an A, mainly, and nothing that Ace said really is invalid. His passing game was pretty fine. I do think some of the issue was receiver play. I really had issues with the receiver play for the most part. It felt like there wasn't as much effort as there was in the OU game. But Adrian, I just can't find a way to give him below an A when he has 4 touchdowns. And some incredibly explosive plays on the ground. Yeah, passing game was fine. At least part of that was receiver play. Part of that was offensive line play. And on the ground, he was phenomenal. So I give him an A for that reason. And then also, PFF gave him some unbelievable grades. His highest of the season by far. He had a 94 offensive grade, 88 in the passing game, and a 92.4 in the run game. I'm not normally gonna just like trot out PFF grades for my game day grades, but I just felt like it was worth mentioning because it was unbelievably high for Adrian. So I feel like it warrants a mention if nothing else. But yeah, an A for me for Adrian.
Yep. Next up is the running backs, and Deuce Vaughn is here to collect his basically weekly A. The only thing keeping it from an A plus is touchdown and the fumble. I'm not going to blame the fact that he got the wind knocked out of him for the fumble. I ended up just giving him an A because he's just the moment that I think Deuce has kind of hit his ceiling. He starts showing that he's improved his vision a little bit. I still think DJ Giddens has marginally better vision, but that's just via his running style and the fact that he wants to put his hands to read leverage on blockers, whereas Deuce just kind of wants to like weave his way between the blockers as best he can. But every single time I think Deuce has hit his ceiling, he does something new. He turns into the best blocker on the team. He improves his vision a little bit. He serves as a clear out receiver. Deuce gets an A.
Yeah, Deuce gets an A from me as well. Basically the same reasons. I did toy with giving him an A minus because of the fumble, but I'm not gonna lose sleep over it. He had a great day, 170 yards on the ground. It's hard to not give him an A for that. Yeah, the A plus could have happened if he had a touchdown. Which again, some of that is just QB run has been money. When we get, well, I say when we get anywhere, really, I guess
Yeah.
it just works when we've been using it. 7.4 yards per carry. That's elite. Yeah, I had a few explosive plays that really helped that, but still. And then he also had a catch. He's not really been getting as many targets in the passing game as of late, which some of that I just think is focus from the defense on him. Because I think a lot of defenses see him as like the guy to follow when it comes to the passing game for receiving, especially when he motions out. So he's just not open as much. But yeah, he gets an A. DJ Giddens saw like 3 snaps and he was fine, I guess. He didn't get the ball. But
Didn't really do
so yeah, I didn't
anything.
do anything really.
Next up is wide receivers. Now, this is one of those situations where I could easily just point at production and give them like a mid grade. I don't feel like that tells the whole story because like there are a few times that the more and more I watch the receivers, the less and less I'm seeing what I thought Thad Ward would have brought to this as a wide receivers coach. Because I really thought that the number one thing that Thad Ward was going to bring, just based off his prior experiences, was finesse-based receivers, receivers who run really crisp routes, who know how to separate and how to get open, or even how to slow down your routes to get into holes and zone coverage while still keeping a little bit of momentum. I expected Thad Ward to be like to bring that to this room. And maybe that was a bit unfair of me to expect him to do that in like 6 months and to undo not 6 months, but what, like nine, something like that.
Roughly.
Yeah, and to undo the years of coaching that these receivers have gotten, that maybe is a bit of an unfair expectation. But still, I can't help but want more out of the receivers just in how they're playing. So I say this like they had an awful game. They didn't. They were fine. I ended up giving them a C minus because like, a C minus to me, what it means is they did all right, but they left you wanting more.
I gave them a C, basically the same reasons, just there's just something lacking right now from that room. I feel like they had a really nice game against OU, say for a couple of moments, but I feel like we didn't really get anything from them in this game. Uh, say for like the first drive. The first drive, it looked like we had some things designed to get everybody open at various times. Philip had the nice concentration catch, if we can call it that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Cade was okay, leading receiver. Malik, we only saw him on that first drive, and then he didn't really do much else. Just pretty uninspiring performance from the receiver room. It's getting pretty frustrating. I'd like to see more RJ Garcia going forward because I want to see what we have going forward with this receiver room because allegedly
Yeah,
he was really impressive in the camp,
gone
but we're not really
forever, I
seeing it.
guess.
He's really, I think he's only had 2 receptions this year. He rotates in occasionally, but we haven't seen a ton of him yet. I'd like to see more.
we
So a C for
we
me.
haven't seen any receivers outside of the top three. I think Jaden Jackson has gotten like 2 snaps.
Yeah,
I think
Jaden
Porter
Jackson's got,
has more snaps than Jaden
yeah,
Jackson.
Porter got a few snaps against like South Dakota or Missouri, I think it was. It was Missouri, I think. But yeah, we're definitely pretty strict on offensive rotation this year, it seems like we are not really subbing very much like we did in years past. It feels like we're trying to get a lot of guys on the field. Um, but yeah, that's maybe our best three, but we might want to try and rotating in a little bit more because it's clear that these guys are struggling with something that they're just not getting open. And part of that is just, we're going to need to get out and recruit some really good receivers, which Andre Davis is coming in. I think he's going to be really good.
Yeah.
Um, so
I think that'll be an emphasis this upcoming year is going to be getting one or two, no, I guess one more at this point, really high upside receiver.
yeah, but yeah, it was a frustrating day for the receivers for sure.
Yeah. Next up is tight ends and fullbacks. Now, if you look at receiving production, you say Ben Sinnott had a catch, Sammy Wheeler had a catch, whatever, go about your day. That doesn't tell the whole story either because whenever we switch to two tight ends, 12 personnel, they suddenly just turn into like basically auxiliary offensive linemen. Or whenever Ben Sinnott lined up at fullback, Ben Sinnott had an amazing block on that 69-yard run where he served as the kickout player. And I'm like, okay, I love that play design. Can we see more of it? And they said, you get something similar once and you will never see it the rest of the game, which is fine. But the tight ends and fullbacks, honestly, just for their blocking performances, gets a B plus for me because they were that good when run blocking.
Yeah, copy paste what you said and put it for me because I gave him a B plus too for basically the same reason because they didn't do a whole lot in the passing game. Ben Sinnott had a couple other targets that he wasn't able to reel in. Both would have been really tough catches, so I'm not going to hold it against him. Um, but yeah, they were fine in the receiving game, but this was their best blocking game of the year, I think. Ben Sinnott, like you said, he had a great block on one of those long runs. And Wheeler was pretty serviceable in pass and protection as well, and then run blocking. So a B plus for me for the tight ends and fullbacks.
Yep. Next up is offensive line. Well, they were better than they were against Tulane. They weren't atrocious. They figured it out eventually, but the opening stages of the game, the pass rush was really getting to us. And well, to kind of steal from another segment, we kind of asked the question of does K-State's offensive line keep from getting confused with the multiple fronts and deployed looks they use? The answer is not really. They didn't really. They ended up giving up 3 sacks. Run blocking towards the beginning of the game was just fine. But as the game moved on, they got better and better. But still, it was kind of that start that knocked them down for me. And part of it was KT getting poked in the eye and having to go out. Shout out to us for thinking it was a knee because he was grabbing at his like leg. Meanwhile, he just got like poked in the eye.
Yeah, yeah, that was a little strange.
But yeah, I ended up giving them a B minus just because they were above average, but not by much.
I gave them a C plus. Uh, they were pretty okay for the average offensive line, but I have higher expectations for this offensive line. Um, I feel like this should be an offensive line that's getting at least a B grade every week, and they didn't meet that expectation. Cooper Beebe was good. Outside of him, we struggled, I'd say a lot. KT
Panzer was
Leviston,
fine.
Panzer, he had a few pretty costly penalties that really bothered me.
Yeah.
Um, but KT was good in the run block. I'll say he was getting worked in the pass block a few times. Granted, he had a tough matchup, but he's got to do better. Um, Pass protection as a whole was kind of rough for a lot of the game. Um, Run blocking was pretty okay. But I expect more from the offensive line. I could be more harsh, but I'm gonna hold off on that because I know they're battling a lot of injuries right now. Taylor Poitier should be out there, but he's not. And then KT was hurt for a bit as well, with his getting poked in the eye, which is a shame. Uh, and Dawson Delforge was again solid in relief. He wasn't out there very long, only 11 snaps. But I'd expect more going forward from the offensive line. I'm taking it easy on him a little bit this week, just because I know the situation with injuries and whatnot. But yeah, C plus for me.
Yep. Now moving to the defensive side of the ball, starting off with the defensive line. Now you see 6 sacks and you think, well, that's immediately dominant. That's like an A plus performance. I ended up giving them just a flat A, and the main reason was just because of those hiccups that they did of not maintaining their gaps in the running game. Because in a 3-3-5, that is in the running game, that's the I would honestly say that the most stressed part of the position in a 3-3-5 is the defensive line because you're in a constant state of you have to two gap. You have to attack your gap and maintain gap discipline every single play. And that includes when in the running game, you're getting counters run against you. You have to meet the counter block and you have to make sure that it doesn't blow you past. You can't get them under your shoulder pad. You can't let that happen to you. So them slow playing a little bit, that ended up just giving them an A for me. But if my complaint is that they were susceptible to a play call that they haven't seen much this year and is specifically designed to attack the one play style that they've been with all year, I'm willing to chalk that up as good scheming and just give them an A for it.
Yeah, I gave him an A as well. For pretty similar reasons, because yeah, 6 sacks, which granted Khalid Duke's kind of a linebacker. He plays a lot of linebacker, but all of his sacks, I think, came when he was kind of playing down on the line. Um, Felix obviously was great. Nate Matlick had a really nice game. Um, Eli Huggins was pretty solid too. But yeah, you're right. They did really struggle with uh gap discipline in the run game. And that was responsible for some of the lapses in run defense in the middle of the game, like the second and third quarters, especially the third quarter out of half, and second quarter right before half.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they they still were great. If you don't have 6 sacks, this is probably like a B performance, but the 6 sacks that gets you up to an A, but you can't quite give him an A plus. And yeah, Felix had a great day, forcing a fumble, which I think that makes him tied for the all-time K-State lead in forced fumbles
I
for a
think so.
career, which he has 8 because he had 6 last year, and which is
So
incredible.
ridiculous. And it's because the way he's like he gets the sack, he just whoop, just arm over directly towards the ball. Here's a funny thing is that that move won't work against Hunter Deckers because he's left-handed.
Yeah.
That won't work against him, which is so strange to think about. But that's
maybe
a
he'll switch it up.
he just mirrors himself. But that's a question for the Iowa State preview.
But yeah, then yeah, the forced fumble was great. Um, and then yeah, a hurry for Brendan Mott and Felix. Outside of the sacks that he had, I think, like 4 pressures as well,
Mhm.
on top of what he was already doing. Yeah, he had 3 sacks and then 4 hurries. Um, and then Khalid Duke had a hurry and then a QB hit as well. So I mean, they were really getting after the QB. Then Brendan Mott had 3 hurries as well. It was a really, really great day for the pass rush. But run defense, they need to work on their discipline. Texas Tech knew how to attack that, and credit to them for that. But yeah, an A for me.
Yep. Next up are the linebackers. And this is one of the rooms that also kind of was susceptible and kind of gets they kind of catch strays because the D line got caught up in the counter game. But I ended up giving them an A minus because in coverage, unless you're Austin Moore, you kind of left a little bit to be desired, except for when Daniel Green, he had the excellent play where I think he was actually meant to be playing spy, but he just activated his moon boots. And he activated his moon boots and decided to jump into the air, almost get a pick. Austin Moore has quietly become the best linebacker on the roster, which if you would have told me that Austin Moore was going to be the best linebacker in our room at the beginning of the year, I would have laughed in your face. And I wouldn't
Yeah,
have said sorry about it.
as you should have, honestly, going into this year.
Yeah, Austin Moore had a great game. I ended up giving him an A minus. Just, it was a really good game. Not quite enough to get an A, just because, a couple of missed opportunities like in coverage.
Yeah, I gave him an A minus as well. But the A is really for Austin this time around. Because
Powerful name.
yeah, as a powerful name, brings a great deal of honor and respect to you, of course. Daniel Green had 5 tackles. He had the great pass breakup, but he honestly kind of had a few moments where it looked like he was struggling a little bit. Um, I'm not really sure what that's all about, but he there were a few plays where he definitely should have made a play and didn't. They were kind of subtle. Um, but it was a little frustrating in hindsight. Austin Moore, though, was incredible. He had 7 tackles and then the tackle for loss and the pick, a pass breakup, and a QB hurry. I think that pass breakup was a near interception. He
Yeah, it
just about had a
was.
second one. He has been unbelievable so far this year. Um, both he, Felix, and Khalid Duke all have legitimate plays for Big 12 Player of the Week on defense, which is unbelievable to think about. So I gave him an A minus. Again, part of the struggles in the run defense that also does go on to them. Less so than the defensive line. But it was a bit of a struggle there, at least for a bit, but they kind of figured it out. And they did miss a few in pass protection. They're linebackers, not defensive backs. So it's, you give them a little bit more leeway there, but you like to see a little bit better. I think Lee Duke was solid. Gavin Forche got some snaps, missed a couple of tackles. He was really trying his best.
He
And
was doing his best.
yeah, Desmond Purnell played some, and he didn't do anything noticeably bad, at least. So there's that. I'm had a couple tackles, so all around pretty solid day for the linebackers. Save for a handful of plays, but Austin Moore has been good enough to continue to give an A- to this group.
Yep. Next up is the defensive backs, and well, Echo Island got thrown on exactly once, which that happens because Echo is still only 6 foot, and the receiver that was thrown to was like 6'4". That's sometimes you get visitors to Echo Island. That happens. But overall, I'm not gonna say I was disappointed with the defensive backs performance. I was just left wanting a little bit more, especially because I think that this is probably our deepest and best unit on the team. I ended up giving them a B. And the main reason I say B is because, there wasn't any major coverage busts like there were against Oklahoma. That said, there were a couple of moments where we were a tick slow on the play. First thing I'm thinking of is Drake Cheatham on the little spot pattern that was run from the slot. If he's there literally 2 milliseconds earlier, that's a pick six. And I'm also thinking of the time Echo got kind of busted up on the sidelines because the receiver was bigger than him. I'm thinking of times that there were guys kind of running open deep that just weren't thrown to. And I know about 75 yards of what was it, like 360 of Donovan Smith's yards were from, that last drive. But nevertheless, it was just a performance that wasn't forgettable. It wasn't bad. It just ended up being fine to me. And that to me is a B grade. They were above average, a good unit, but they weren't knocking my socks off like I normally expect them to.
Yeah, I actually gave him a B as well. So I think we perfectly matched on the defensive side of the ball. I swear we
And
don't
we
really
don't do
share
this on
these.
purpose. The thing is, we just
Yeah.
watch the same game.
Yeah. We the only time that we ever really talk about grades beforehand is if we're just like really confused about how to grade a particular group because we're like, hey, they did this really well, but they also really sucked at this point. And then we kind of come out to like the same thing anyways, most of the time.
Yeah.
Other than Adrian, which even then it was still pretty close.
Yeah.
But yeah, I gave a B to the defensive backs. Um Echo, he did get pretty much burned, not quite completely burned, but it was close. And then he kind of struggled to bring him down. But then again, he came back a drive later or two and had an excellent pass breakup, kind of fighting through a bigger receiver. I think it was a third down as well. So it was a really big play for Echo. And I was really pleased with that. Julius Brents continues to be apparently the best run support corner in the country.
It's so
Yeah.
strange. That was the knock against. We mention this every week, but that was the knock against his games. Like, oh, he doesn't want to play run support. Are you
Yeah.
sure?
PFF actually lists Julius Brents as being targeted 3 times with 2 receptions for 5 yards. One of them went for 7. One of them was a loss of 2, and the other target was an interception. So all around, you could say that's a pretty good day for Julius Brents, to put it lightly.
Yeah.
Then he was really, really great. Kobe Savage, he had the forced fumble at one point. I forget exactly when it was, but he was generally pretty solid with Kobe Savage.
He was the one
Running
that
around
forced the fumble that
yep,
Matlick recovered.
yep, he did. And he did have the late hit that extended a drive for Tech, which that was really frustrating. Which I really think if he hadn't kind of done like the throwing down motion with his arms, like where he kind of it like made it look like he was doing more than he was, I think.
Yeah,
Uh,
I
or
think he was just in a
his arms
hurry.
just kind of swung after the guy was like falling, and it made it look like he was throwing him down. So if you're the ref, you kind of have to call that. It's just like a mental lapse. I don't think he'll do it again. He'll
No.
learn. I'm not concerned about that at all.
Mhm.
TJ Smith, he was fairly good. He's getting more and more snaps right now. It seems like he's probably fighting back from an injury or something. Josh Hayes continues to kind of pseudo fill in the Reggie role of last year, of just being a defensive back that just flies in out of nowhere and makes a big play in the backfield.
Yeah.
He's got at least one of those a game, it feels like. But yeah, the coverage, I think you put it best. We were just a step behind a lot of times. But I'm not going to get too upset with the defensive backs. Like you said, a lot of those yards came pretty late in the game, so I'm not going to get too angry about that. Uh, yeah, I mean, like looking back, I mean that those last two drives they had 18-yard pass, 1, 2, 8, 6, 26, 10, 4, and then 20, 25. That's like 100 yards right there almost. Not quite. I don't think I wasn't tracking as I when I can
Hmm.
count. And then so yeah, that's a lot of yardage there near the end of the game. Donovan Smith still had an all right game. Uh Made some okay passes, made some not okay passes, but the the DBs generally did their job, and ultimately we win this game by 2 possessions anyways, and could have very easily been 3. So B for me.
Yep. Next up is the offensive coordinator, Colin Klein. This it's difficult because on one hand, he did figure it out eventually. On the other hand, I I want more because I see what he does against like the Oklahomas. I see what he does against LSU, and I'm like, I want that every game. That's like a top half of the Big 12 offensive coordinator right there. And then granted, I've only seen him lay an egg once, but other times he's just fine. Like he's okay. He's hiding the playbook during those non-con games. And like to me, it's just he's a tick slow to adjust, which is the same problem I had with Courtney Messingham, except for the fact that Colin Klein eventually does adjust. I'm sorry, Messingham keeps catching strays, but I I ended up giving him a C plus because after that first drive, I expected okay, heavy dose of quarterback run. We didn't really see it again until like the fourth quarter.
Yeah, that really fell off the face of the earth after, getting us like 60 whatever yards on the very first run.
Yeah, and I want to see him develop more counter punches when things aren't going perfectly. Because to me, that second quarter really concerns me because it did kind of take him that entire quarter and a halftime to make any meaningful adjustments. The red zone play calling still isn't great if quarterback power isn't clicking. I want to see him develop more counter punches to things like that zone read game that he has, like those pistol dives that we have. I want to see him develop like because he ran it up against, I don't even know who was up against. It may have, I don't know. But he basically ganked the play design from South Dakota that they ran, where they ran a fake speed option, turn it into a pop pass. I want to see plays like that develop off of those QB power looks. I want to see Colin Klein get more creative with his play call. And this isn't even a situation where you can say, oh, like the game was well in hand the entire time. No, 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 no. It was a two-score game for the majority of the game, and for a lot of it was a one-score game. So I ended up giving him a C plus, again, above average, but left me wanting more from him.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, is left wanting more. I gave him a B minus. He did adjust eventually, and he deserves credit for that. And we had a very nice fourth quarter. This game kind of felt similar to the Nevada game, save for the Nevada game of last year, where they really kind of pulled away late after a hot start. Um, and although the big difference here is that Texas Tech did kind of have a late push, kind of. Um, but yeah, I would like to see the red zone play calling improve a bit. Part of that I do think is the receivers kind of struggling. in compact situations. It seems like the receivers need a lot of space to work, which is understandable to a certain degree, but our passing game is not really meant for red zone situations for the most part, unless we've really got like some wide open access like we had on the slant for Brooks this past weekend, the week before with Malik. But beyond that, I do think some of it, I can see the logic in some of the stuff he was doing in the red zone, where I think it was twice in the first quarter where we ran the ball on third down and like kind of intermediate distance, like 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8.
Mhm.
I think the idea there was probably get 4-ish yards
Yep.
and then go for it on fourth.
Yeah,
And
prod for what you can.
yeah, I think that was what they wanted to do, but both times we just got stood up, unfortunately, and had to settle for a field goal, which was very frustrating to not capitalize early in that game because we could have been up 21-0 after the first quarter in this game. And we could have been up probably 28-7-ish at halftime if we played to the best of our abilities. And this, granted, games like this are frustrating, but at the same time, you can draw a big positive from them. I'm talking about games where you should win by more than you did. The big positive to draw from games like that is that you seemingly outplayed for a lot of the game, at least part of it, and you were the better team on the field, but just it was more beating yourself than the other way around, which is kind of unusual for K State, at least like from growing up with a lot of Bill Snyder teams that didn't beat themselves that often until later in his tenure. Um, that's going to upset commentators that love to go to the bag of K
It's a
State
disciplined
cliches.
K-State team.
At this disciplined, hard nosed, blue collar, lunch pail K State team that doesn't beat itself and loves to run. Where have I heard that before? And
Mm.
and they wow, they love special teams.
Okay, that one's true.
It is true though. Yeah, but there's definitely um a box of K-State cliches that they
Stereotype.
pass among the networks depending on who's broadcasting.
Yeah.
But yeah, Klein gets a B- from me. Ultimately a fine game, but sometimes uninspiring, but he did figure it out.
Yep. Next up is Joe Klanderman. I'm not going to mix it around here. Yeah, I gave up a lot of yards. The only thing keeping him from getting an A plus is not making the immediate adjustment to slow plays and still having them work a little bit. I ended up giving him an A because he finally did something that I've really wanted to see us do more, and that's run zero blitzes. Because I don't think that with how fast most of our safeties and linebackers are, good luck. Good luck against zero blitzes, moron. It's not going to work. You can run your fake little smoke screens if you want. You can try to run go balls up the seam. Yeah, good luck running a go ball 98% of the time against Julius Brents and Echo. It's not happening. I wanted to see us run zero more, and we did. Which, fun fact, I learned apparently it's called Spark. So the name for that is Spark. So yeah, it's I ended up giving him an A. He had a great performance other than dealing with the counter stuff, which is such a small part of the game.
I gave him an A- for taking a little too long, I think, to make the adjustment. The end of the second quarter was really rough for the defense. And then the third quarter wasn't great either. They really buckled down after that, though. They had a great first quarter. And then a pretty solid fourth quarter as well, where they really only gave up anything at the end. And even then they still were able to seal the game with the interception. Um, he had a really another solid performance that was a little shaky for a while. He was on some thin ice for a bit, but the unit as a whole figured it out. So not going to complain too much. Uh, so A- for Joe Klanderman.
Yep. So now we can start talking about answering the pregame questions. We'll kind of do these quickly because a lot of them were yes or no's. Does Klein use more of the misdirection and outside running game to abuse the defense? Outside running game, he tried. Misdirection, not really.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty much it. We didn't do a ton of misdirection. Um, and yeah, outside running game, we gave it a few shots. Didn't really work. Had some big losses on those plays. So yeah, that pretty much sums that up.
Yeah. Can K-State avoid giving up too much free yardage against an offense that looks for it? They didn't go for as much free yardage as I thought they would, but on the times that they did, we were, I'd say, batting a good like 300 against it, which is all I would really expect.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. And I agree. I was expecting a little bit more of that, and it was not that at all from Texas Tech. Which, granted, they had other ways of getting the yards they wanted, which is kind of stepping on the next question, I suppose.
Yeah. Can the defensive line dominate in the trenches against a weak unit? Yes, almost to their detriment,
They really did dominate too much in this
which is
game.
so weird to say, but it's true. That's the point of the counter game.
Yeah, the pass rush was absolutely phenomenal in this game. Exactly what I think you and I were hoping for. The pass, simply phenomenal stuff. Felix was great, and the pass rush, Khalid Duke was great as well. Daniel Green graded really well in the pass rush, which is weird. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know what that's all about, but sure,
I saw
fine.
him rush. He wasn't bad.
Yeah, he was doing just fine. Everybody not named those guys was serviceable, or Nate Matlick, and he did pretty well. And so yeah, run game not as good, which was more of a discipline issue than a domination issue.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I'll say generally yes.
Does K-State's offensive line keep from getting confused with multiple looks? We talked about it. The answer is not really.
Yeah, they really struggled with the many looks, especially people not named Cooper Beebe. Go figure. And yeah, it was pretty frustrating, especially in the pass protection. They were not having a great day.
No. Same question for the quarterback. Yeah, actually, he did.
Yeah,
He
he did just
understood it
fine.
fine.
He knew it was coming, and he really did his best. He got sacked 3 times. I don't think any of them were his fault.
Not really,
Um,
no.
it was just a good pass rush from Tech and K State offensive line. Not really pass blocking that well, uh, intermittently at least. So yeah, not Adrian knew it was happening. So
Yep. So next question. Can 9 a.m. have a repeat performance or at least a comparable one? Comparable? Yeah.
yeah, I think it's fair to call it comparable. Rushing the ball, he had, in terms of total yards, a better game. Had one fewer touchdown. But yeah, running the ball, I'd say it was comparable, arguably better, depending on how you look at it. Passing, obviously not as good. Uh, but not all of that was his fault. Part of that was the pass protection struggled, and the receivers weren't quite as good as they were against OU. So comparable. Yeah, I think you could compare it. The OU game is still a better performance for him all around, I'd say, at least statistically. But he was doing some really good things in this game. He still came away with that 94.2 PFF grade, which is unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's great, great, great stuff from Adrian.
Yep. Which team gets momentum right off the bat? K-State. Can they ride the momentum of last week's victory? Ironically, both of them did.
Yeah, both K State and Texas Tech honestly played really efficient games this week, which is funny to think about. Tech, I believe they actually were technically more efficient than K State in this game, according to some advanced stats. I don't really care because we
I
we
didn't ask.
yeah, I still think that we, for the most part, other than pass blocking for the offensive line and for a segment of the game and the run defense, played the better game. They were very efficient in late game when they were down by 3 possessions. But I I yeah, they both rode momentum from last week, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah. We're back on the numbers hate train.
Hate them.
Securely after avoiding that narrative all this year, we're back on the numbers hate train. But next up is MVPs. And I'm going to start with offense. I know Adrian Martinez got a B plus for me. He also scored, 4 touchdowns. He's the obvious MVP. Like I know most valuable does not always mean the best. Most valuable, because if it was the best player every single year, Aaron Donald would win the NFL MVP every single year. It's about who's the most valuable player. And 4 touchdowns by default makes you the most valuable player.
Yep. Adrian's another obvious victory here for player of the week. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, honestly. You said it best. He had 4 touchdowns. I mean, when you've got 4 touchdowns, you're the MVP. I don't get to make the rules. So
I don't get to make the rule. All right. Now let's go to defense, and you can start with that one.
yeah, like I said earlier, this is a very, very tough award to give out
Four
week in, week
names.
out. Yeah, like I mean, this week you really could pick 4 different people, and I'd say, yeah, they absolutely were. I am going to roll with Felix for the MVP. Um 6 tackles, 3 sacks, and a forced fumble. Massive impact. And when he wasn't getting sacks, he was getting really close. And the lost yardage wasn't as good as Khalid Dukes was. But he still had a phenomenal game. That forced fumble was really clutch. And he was generally just an absolute menace in the pass rush. So I got to go with Felix here for the MVP, but there's plenty of great options here.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you just because I feel like in a performance where just about everyone had like a really amazing performance, Felix was the X factor. He was the game wrecker. Without Felix, this game, I'm not going to say it because it has a different outcome, but it goes differently because Felix was in the quarterback's lap the entire game, and it didn't matter how many blockers you put on him in pass rush, in pass protection. He was going to break through it. He was going to get through. And just the idea of Felix is it caused Donovan Smith to move off of his spot a little bit. And whenever you're a quarterback, moving off of your spot, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it really is, especially when you're moving a spot out of fear of the defensive end. So I ended up also going with Felix, but if I had to pick a number 2 in order to be different, I'd probably go with Austin Moore, just by virtue of him being the most versatile player on a defense that quite literally has a hybrid position, and he's not the one playing it.
Yeah, I gotta give my honorable mention was also Austin Moore. My order for the top 4 was Felix, Austin Moore, Khalid Duke, Kobe Savage, in that order. I thought all those guys were totally acceptable candidates for the player of the game for MVP, I should say.
Yep. Next up is the takeaways. Now, the first thing is that this team is not a team that will lay down. It's a team that can fight through adversity, even if it is self created adversity, which I feel like that was the lone question that I really had after the Oklahoma game. Was a lot of the adversity from the Oklahoma game was because of who we were playing and where we were playing them. This game, it was a little bit of us creating our own problems and then proving that we can solve them.
Yeah.
Like,
I was waiting for you to say something
no,
else
no,
after
I was
that.
I was done. I was done.
Yeah, I thoroughly expected you to say another thing after that. I was just like waiting for the other shoe to
Is,
drop.
is he gonna say it?
No, yeah. They did prove that they can fight through adversity in this game. And yeah, you said it well. They did kind of create some problems of their own making. But they were able to fight through and still get a 2 possession victory. Um should have been more, probably, but I'm not gonna lose sleep over it.
No.
The next takeaway, Colin Klein does need to work on his consistency. He could probably make that note for a lot of offensive coordinators, but
Yeah.
Colin Klein really, other than the OU game, has struggled in this department, I would say.
Yeah, it's like a drive to it's like a drive to drive thing where one drive he'll have all the answers and he'll, ring them up perfectly. And then another drive, it's like, well, Guess we're punting.
Yeah. Yeah, because Messingham, it was always there were specific quarters where he was really bad. Klein, so far, it really hasn't felt as much like that. Like we found success in about every quarter at various times throughout the season, it feels like. Um, and it more, yeah, like you said, I think it's a good way to look at it as drive by drive. And it's not always his fault. Sometimes the execution isn't the best. Execution was generally solid, I feel like, but there were moments where I would have liked to see maybe some different play calls. But again, that's Monday morning quarterback. So
Yeah. We already talked about 9 a.m. being tied for the best running quarterback in the country behind Malik Cunningham. Next up is the Deuce and 9 a.m. Like having that backfield is disgusting. That should not
yeah,
be allowed.
it is absolutely unfair to defenses across the country. Um, they have been nothing short of spectacular in the last few weeks. I mean, their numbers are rivaling the best backfield duo in 20 years, going back to L. Roberson and Darren Sproles, really. Because Deuce right now already has 638 yards on the season.
And it doesn't feel
Adrian,
like that. It's so weird. It
I know
doesn't
it does.
feel like that.
It really doesn't because we're so used to what he's doing. And then Adrian, he's got 469 yards thus far this year. Adrian is already over 1,000 yards all purpose, which is more notable simply because the passing game hasn't been explosive. So the fact that we're getting there is pretty phenomenal. Um, but yeah, this is one of the best backfield duos in a long time for K State.
Next up is the passing game still requires a little bit of work, whether it be in, making sure that you have more protections called for those deeper schemed plays, or just getting guys more open through receiving talent in and of itself.
Yeah, it seemed like we kind of had something working on the first real drive. I guess is what I'll call it, like the one where we actually had to like try.
Yeah, the one
Um,
where we didn't just run QB power.
yeah, the one without two like major explosive plays. Um, the it seemed like we kind of had a rhythm going the passing game almost. We were spreading the ball around and had different guys involved and everything. Beyond that, it seemed like we were kind of struggling to get some rhythm going in the pass game. Um, I would like to see more rhythm, of course, going forward. That's not an unpopular opinion. I'm sure Colin
Yeah.
Klein and Chris Kleiman feel the same. Um, but what we're really gonna need is somebody in the receiver room to really step up, I feel like, and be the guy. Because if you go down the list right now of our number one receivers, you're gonna notice that it's very similar. Malik Knowles, 15 catches, 157 yards, one touchdown. Phillip Brooks, 16 catches, 155 yards, one touchdown. Cade Warner, 14 catches, 133 yards, one touchdown. Everybody's kind of doing the same things right now.
It's just
Uh,
so they all have different skill sets. They shouldn't have the same stat lines.
that is the weird part, right? They all do different things. Malik Knowles and Phillip Brooks couldn't be more different as receivers. It's really odd, honestly. But we really need a receiver to step up. That guy's probably Malik Knowles. But he's just gonna have to really focus in and be that guy for the receiver room. Either that or Deuce Vaughn's gonna have to step in again. Which I would allow happily, but I would prefer it be a wide receiver. I don't want Deuce to have to carry the rushing and receiving game again. So I would love for a receiver to step up,
Yeah.
and I'm sure they would too.
I just realized I took two in a row, so you can take the next two.
Yeah. So Kobe Savage, shooting his shot with the cheerleader, best moment of the season thus far. I did not notice it happen mid game. I didn't even notice it till somebody pointed it out after the game.
It's on Twitter.
Yeah, I was on Twitter. Very very funny moment for Kobe Savage.
I think it worked too. That's the best part.
I certainly hope he was successful.
She was blushing as well. That's the best part because you can see like a little bit of like the shot of the cheerleaders after he blows the kiss, and you can see one of them just blushing profusely.
It
I
might have been the mascot though. I think he was in the vicinity.
was blowing a kiss towards the mask.
Yeah, the mascot, whatever his name is, and his comically large Magnum handgun. Are you okay?
You had to throw in the handgun because you knew exactly.
I'd like to say that was unintentional. That is not the type of man I am.
I like to consider myself a man.
That's a deep drive to left by Nick Castellanos.
Castellanos making a 3-0 ball game. I'm not
Not
sure
sure
how
how much
much
longer I'm
longer
gonna
to
be
be
doing
doing
this.
this. All right. Let's read the
Anywho,
next thing.
moving on to the last one. If we can avoid quarters like the second quarter, we're gonna win a lot of games this year. We really just need to play 4 complete quarters every game.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, when you put it like that, that's every
Yeah,
team's goal.
really?
Yeah, no kidding, right? So, but this was a game where if K-State plays better in the second quarter, this we probably get close to touching 50.
Yeah.
I'd say.
We could have dropped a 50 burger on this team. And it's not because they're bad, it's because we're good.
Yeah, like that's not a Texas Tech issue at all. Because their defensive front is really good. It's one of the best in the conference. But we knew it going in that if you could get past that defensive line, there was going to be a lot of green space. That's not a controversial thing to say. They're the further back you get in their defense, the less good it is. Basically, is what it is. And I mean, their whole defensive strategy is just absolutely suffocate you with pressure and hope you aren't able to navigate it.
Yeah.
And by the fourth quarter, we were able to. So,
Yep. I agree. Now that pretty much do you have any final thoughts on this game?
go Cats.
Go Cats. Always. So the next game will be Farmageddon in Iowa, in Ames, up against Iowa State. So please be sure to look out for the preview on that one. It's an episode we're looking forward to because I watched one game all the way through, and let's just say, even without doing deep dives, I see problems. But
There are definite flaws with this Iowa State team, to
yeah,
put it lightly.
yeah, we'll put it like that. But that pretty much wraps up this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. If you want to contact the show, you can follow us on Twitter at Aggieville Alleycats. That's capital A, and capital C in cats. If you want to email us, we're AggievilleAlleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on a more personal note, I am at AC Edwards00.
I am at Connor Baltazar, capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out the official Aggieville Alleycats merch store, where you can find such designs as Play Sandstorm Cowards, the staff-approved Doomtang Clan, and Neon Alleycats. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.